How's it going, everybody? I'm AV Obsessed, and if you're watching this video on my channel, that means that you probably are too. And this is the Starke Sound Beta5 bookshelf speaker. So this video is going to be a full review with measurement graphs and comparisons to other speakers in a similar size and price category. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure that you like the video. If you like it at the end, you don't have to like the video, but please subscribe to the channel because I want to be at 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2026. And the only way that that's going to happen is if you, yes, you, the guy who's watching the video right now and isn't subscribed, you have to subscribe. 90-some% of my viewers are not subscribed. So if everybody who watches these videos subscribed, I'd be getting up there way faster. So rambling on and on now, let's just jump to a little bit of an intro. I think the first thing that most people are going to notice if you pick up a pair of Starke Sound Beta5s is that they feel like they're built quite a bit better than most other $500 speakers, if not all other $500 speakers, all the other $500 speakers that I've looked at least. Firstly, it's a 15-pound speaker for a speaker this size, which, speaking of the size, it's 11.9 inches tall, 7.2 inches wide, and 13 inches deep. So it is considerably deeper than it is tall. But for a speaker of that size, 15 pounds is a pretty good amount of weight. The other thing that you're going to notice right away too is this wood veneer that they used. In my opinion, this is a beautiful wood veneer that they use. It has so much texture. Like, there's so many grooves that you can feel like when you run your fingers along these speakers. It feels like a really, really high quality wood veneer. None of the corners are like exposed or peeling either, which is obviously really nice. You don't want to have that going on your speakers. And then when you spin it around back, you'd notice that it's got a pretty good sized port with a little bit of a flare to it. I never really heard any port chuffing, so that's good. The terminal plate is a big surprise because this terminal plate is at least 1/8 of an inch, if not 3/16 of an inch thick aluminum, and it's got very nice silkscreen writing on it. It looks and feels like the rear terminal plate from a much more expensive speaker, not a $500 speaker. Like every other speaker that I have in this kind of price category has a plastic terminal plate on it, whereas this one is quite a chunky piece of aluminum. And the binding posts that they used on here, I don't know that they're actual WBT binding posts, but they look and feel very similar to the binding posts on the back of my Rotel RB1590, which is a $4,000 power amp. So the fact that they have similar quality binding posts on a pair of $500 speakers is excellent. And then also, like, it's just a very well-built cabinet. That knock test that everybody likes to do on their speakers, like, these things just feel extremely solid. So they're not doing like a lot of companies in the lower price categories where they're using like a 5/8. Like, these are definitely at least a 3/4 inch MDF cabinet. And then I also am a big fan of the grills, which is funny because the first thing my brother said when he came over and saw these speakers was that he wished that the grills were just your traditional black grill versus like this heather gray. I totally disagree with him. I think the heather gray looks really cool on these. And let's get underneath the grills. And yeah, one thing about the grills too is these things stay on. They're nice metal push pins that go into the rubber sockets in the front baffle. So if you have kids, you don't really have to worry about them breaking off the pins that hold the grills on, and you don't have to worry about them poking at your tweeters and stuff like that because those grills stay on extremely well. Underneath the grill, you will find a 29mm silk dome tweeter with this interesting, almost like a what's the word I'm looking for? A sunflower looking waveguide around it. And then you've got a 5¼ inch carbon fiber woofer. And yeah, this front baffle is very nice. It's a totally different material than the sides and the back of the speaker, but it's also very stout and looks really good. The color that I have here is called the Aoki Flaxen Gray. Out of the 3 colors that they have available, this was my favorite. Part of the reason that it's my favorite is because of the fact that in the lighter color, like I can't remember what they call their white off the top of my head right now, but in the white color, the 9 screws that are in this waveguide around the tweeter, there's so much more contrast that they stand out like a sore thumb, and it just makes the front of the speaker look a lot busier. That would be one thing that I would critique for Starke sound, is if you guys work on a Beta5 Mark II at some point, I would put all of these screws behind this sunflower style waveguide and just have the waveguide pressed in. That way the screws are all hidden behind it, and it would just clean up the front of the speaker a lot more. Taking a look at the spec sheet of the Starke Sound Beta5s, you'd probably be pretty impressed if you saw that they say that the 3 dB down point for these is about 45 hertz and that they can play up to 23 kilohertz, which is pretty impressive. What's not super impressive, although it's not a bad thing, they're clearly trading some sensitivity for bass capabilities, but these speakers are only rated at 86 decibels sensitivity, and that's at 4 ohms. So you will need a pretty stout power amplifier to get the most out of the Starke Sound Beta5s. They recommend an amplifier, it says, anywhere between 30 watts and 150 watts. I would probably say you don't want to power them with anything less than, 75, 85 watts, unless you're looking at like a class AB amplifier. Like when I was running them on the Rotel A8 integrated, which is only rated at 30 watts per channel, that thing drove these just fine. But the Rotel A8 seems to drive everything just fine. It doesn't seem to matter how demanding of a speaker it is, even though that thing's only rated at 30 watts. But when I was trying these out on the Wimamp kind of fell flat on its face with these speakers. Yes, you can play them fairly okay, but if you try to crank it up, or if you're trying to listen to like bass heavy tracks, the Wimamp just does not have the guts to drive these things super well. I did the majority of my listening with these speakers on the SMSL AO300 Pro, because that thing outputs 85 watts at 8 ohms and 165 watts at 4 ohms, and that drove these perfectly as well. So enough about the specs and the styling of the speakers. What do they actually sound like? Well, I was pretty impressed by these things. Being from a company that I've never heard of before, and also being that they're considerably smaller than most of the bookshelf speakers that I have reviewed. It's the first one that I've reviewed with a 5¼ inch woofer, except for the Sony SSCS5 Mark IIs, but these things can definitely keep up with the bigger dogs, like the SVS Prime bookshelves, the Elac DB63s, even the Klipsch RP600M Series 2, which is a much larger and considerably more expensive speaker. These things can actually throw punches with those speakers, which kind of surprised me, mostly because of the fact that it's a 5¼ inch woofer. These things can play like pretty deep. Yeah, the bass definitely surprised me. Mid-range, it's definitely more lifted in the mids than than the other speakers that I just talked about. Basically, the other 3 have a little bit more of that V-shape curve to it. Well, not really the Elacs. The Elacs don't have a V-shape. They have more like a slow, gradual decline from the bass to the treble. but the SVSs and the Klipsch's have a little bit more of that V-shaped curve. These are more, there's a good amount of bass, a good amount of mid-range, and a little bit less treble. There's a little bit of a peak that I was hearing, and then when I actually did the measurements, there I could see that peak right at around 1,000 hertz. But yeah, they're quite rich in the mid-range, so if you're looking for more of that retro vintage style sound that's going to be a lot warmer and have more body in the mid-range, versus most speakers these days seem to adhere more to that either that slow drop off like the Elacs, or having that little bit of the V shape or the smile shaped curve to them. If you're looking more for something that's going to be richer in the mid-range, like more vintage speakers, these are definitely going to be your, like, probably #1 pick. And they're still pretty well detailed in the treble too. They roll off at around 15K according to my measurements. But yeah, there's still plenty of detail there and everything. So tonally, I would say they are definitely going to appeal to people who like that warmer, like, mid-range. And as you could see in the graphs, there is a little bit of a bump at about 1,000 hertz. And if I put the Elac graph up as well, the Elacs have definitely quite a bit less treble than the Starke sounds here. And they, instead of having that bump at 1,000 hertz, they have more of it. Well, the dip there with the Elacs is more about 1,500 hertz, but yeah, the sound is quite different between the two. And surprisingly, because my #1 thing that I was shocked with on the Elacs was the bass, these things can keep up pretty close with the Elacs. I think the Elacs might edge it out a little bit more in the bass department, but yeah, as far as mid-range and treble goes, these things just kind of blow the Elacs away. And as far as soundstage and imaging, the soundstage and imaging characteristics between these and the Elacs are actually pretty similar. If you've seen my review of the Elacs, you know that's a pretty good thing to say about a speaker like this. The fact that the soundstage is pretty similar. They create a very large soundstage. If anything, actually, I'd say the Starke sounds are probably a little bit ahead of the Elacs in the soundstage, because I did feel like there was a little bit more focus on the center image on the Starke sounds than on the Elacs. The Elacs create a really, really large soundstage, but it's also very vague. Like, there's nothing really locked in space on the Elacs. These at least can deliver a very good locked-in center image. Not so much good with the depth and stuff like that, but you need to get into a much higher end speaker. Even the SVS prime bookshelves and the Klipsch RP600Ms don't do that all that well. So yeah, soundstage and imaging from the Starke Sound Beta5 here is also quite good. I'm going to mention 3 different songs that I always use when I'm testing speakers and comparing them to each other. I will listen to these songs over and over again, like one speaker, then another speaker, then another speaker. But at least they're all really good songs, but they each have some different characteristics that kind of show me how a speaker performs. And the first one is a song by Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros called Home. And one of the biggest things that I'm just looking out for in that song is there's a deep kick drum that just basically sets the beat in the background of the song that's playing consistently throughout the whole song. And it's a very deep, powerful sound, but it also has like texture to it. You can hear like the actual like warble of the kick drum diaphragm. And these speakers performed very well for that. I actually feel like the Elacs, when I was playing that song on those speakers, sounded like the bass was a little bit deeper and more pronounced, but the tone and texture didn't sound as realistic like an actual kick drum. So I would say, like, if you're looking for just raw bass extension, then the Elacs might be what you're looking for. But if you're looking for more textured and like tonally accurate bass, I would say that the Starke sounds have that over the Elacs. Another really good song that I like, because there's a lot of stuff going on in this song, it's a very complex recording, is Wordless Chorus by My Morning Jacket. Especially when he's doing the wordless chorus of the song. The title is kind of self-explanatory of the song. He is basically just belting out notes without actually like having any words in the chorus. And the soundstage during that part of the song just should be really, really big and enveloping. And these speakers did that really well. But then there's also like these odd sound effects, kind of like swooshing sounds that kind of whoosh around the room. And I feel like with the Starke sounds, the positioning of that sound was a little bit better than on the Elacs. The Elacs do a really good job with that sound. But I think as far as just kind of casting that sound around your room, the Starke sounds did a little bit better for that. And then the last song is I Wish I Was by the Avett Brothers. Now, this song is very stripped down and basic. It's really just the vocalist and two guitarists, I believe. It's like there's a guitar in the left and a guitar in the right. And then this is like one of the best songs for hearing like how clearly like locked in the center image is, because the vocals should basically all sound like they're coming from like a phantom center right in the middle of the speakers. And usually if they have any kind of ability to cast a three-dimensional soundstage, it should be a little bit higher than like the plane of the tweeters. And these speakers did relatively well with that. The his voice was coming from right in the middle, but it didn't sound like specifically like it was, you know, at the singer's height, like you would, you know, want to hear it if it was like a live performance. But they did extremely well for that. Like you could hear the, you know, the regular acoustic guitar, and I think it's an acoustic bass on the left and the right, and then the vocalist right dead center. And also another thing I listened for in that song is how natural those guitars sound. And I always felt like the Elacs sounded really good for that song, but after going back and forth multiple times between the Elacs and the Starkes, I feel like the bass might be a little bit overcooked on the Elacs. Like this sounded much more like a natural sounding guitar versus the Elacs did. So yeah, I would say for most things, other than like if you're an EDM listener, you probably want to buy the Elacs, because those things just throw just crazy amounts of bass at you, and they're like pretty good for everything else as well. But if you're looking for a lot more like tonally neutral and like well-balanced speaker, that's kind of where I would say you'd want to look at the Starkes. I just want to show you guys really quick, like you don't need to spend a lot of money to have really good sound. The way that I've been listening to the Starke Sound Beta5s here, as you can see, I got this pile of speakers here that I've been comparing them to, the Klipsch RP600M Series 2s, the Elac DB63s, and the SVS Prime bookshelves. But then currently on the stands are the Starke Sound Beta5s, but the stands are the Sanus Steel Foundation Series SF26, 26-inch speaker stands that are about $179 on Amazon. And speaker stands, I just don't understand. They're so expensive. $179. That's actually one of the cheaper, like decent quality speaker stands out there. I tried a bunch of other ones that I sent all of them back until I settled on the Sanus Steel Foundation series here. But yeah, if you don't want to spend a lot of money on speaker stands, but you want something good that you can set your bookshelf speakers on, you can always just use something like this. These are I believe they're solid walnut, if I remember right, just 29-inch tall bar stools that I got for $50 for the pair on Amazon. Yeah, I would definitely recommend spending $50 on a pair of those versus spending even like $100 on a pair of like really cheap speaker stands on Amazon, because they're just not going to be as solid as something like those bar stools. If you can go up to $179, then these Santa Steel Foundation speaker stands are really nice. And then just because it's so much nicer than bare speaker wire, and they're very inexpensive, the speaker wires that I have there are some like pre-made ones from World's Best Cables. And then powering everything, I've got the SMSL AO300 Pro, which is the last review that I did. If you haven't seen that video, go back and watch it. It's an excellent little 2.1 channel integrated amplifier that puts out 85 watts per channel into 8 ohms and 170 into 4. So it has no problem driving these speakers, even though they are a pretty demanding little speaker. And I'm using the WIM Mini Streamer plugged into just an Anker battery bank to get really high quality lossless audio to that amp. And yeah, it's a really good sounding little system for not a whole heck of a lot of money. I mean, let's add it up. We're at $500 for the speakers, $270 for the amp, so you're at $770, plus $90 for the WIM amp, so you're at $860. I'm going to round up and say $40 for the speaker cables, so you're at $900. And then yeah, if you go with the bar stools, you're at $950. If you go for the real speaker stands, you're at $1,080 before tax. So really, really good sounding little hi-fi system, though, for not a whole heck of a lot of money. So who should buy the Starke Sound Beta 5s? Well, anybody who is looking for a very stylish, very well-built, high-quality looking speaker. And if you already have, or you're planning to buy, a fairly stout little amplifier to power them, nothing too crazy, like you don't need anything super expensive, like that SMSL AO300 Pro that I used them with for the most part is only $270. And if you are a person who has more of a preference for that like warmer, more full-bodied mid-range that a lot of vintage speakers used to have, but most speakers nowadays seem to be lacking in, then these are definitely going to check all of your boxes. They're a great little option. And if you got a little bit more money to spend, they also have a Beta 7, which I believe they're $750, but it scales up this woofer up to a 6.5 inch. And I would love to hear what those things sound like and compare, because these things, like I said, they blew me away with how much bass they could make with this tiny little 5.25 inch woofer. Scale that up to a 6.5, and you probably don't even need a subwoofer with those speakers for music listening. I'm sure for movies you would need one, but Starke Sound also makes that, and it's incredibly affordable too. Like they have a 15-inch sub that's only $600. And Eric from Starke Sound, if you're watching this video, I would love to test that thing out. So yeah, if you want a very stylish, very high quality looking and feeling bookshelf speaker, and you plan to power it with a pretty decent little amplifier, and you like that warmer, fuller bodied mid-range and a big soundstage, then I would definitely say the Starke Sound Beta 5 bookshelf speakers are probably going to be a great match for you. So that is my review of the Starke Sound Beta 5 bookshelf speakers. Let me know in the comments, have you guys ever heard of Starke Sound before this video, or before like another YouTuber's video? Because I actually first heard about them from when I watched Hi-Fi Huff did a video review of these same speakers. And it's funny because after watching his video, I was thinking about reaching out to Starke Sound and seeing if I can get them to send me a review pair. And the next day when I checked my inbox, I had an email from Eric from Starke Sound. He was just reaching out to ask if I wanted to review them, so I didn't have to ask. They sent them over without me even like going to them first, which was a really cool moment for me because of, you know, just starting out and growing this YouTube channel. So yeah, if you guys have any experience with this Starke Sound stuff in the past, let me know in the comments. And also, everything that I talked about in this video is going to be in the description below with links of where to buy it. If you buy the Starke Sound Beta 5s, I don't get anything for that because they don't appear to have their stuff on Amazon, so I don't have any kind of affiliate program with them. But if you buy the stands, the cables, the amplifier, anything like that that I talked about in this video using my affiliate links, I will get a very small commission. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it goes a long way towards helping me build up this channel. And obviously also make sure that you like this video and you subscribe to the channel and click the little notification bell so you're notified when the next video comes out, and I will see you guys in the next one.